Welcome back to another episode of Conservative Conversations. It's your host, Reid and Frank. How's it going today, Frank?
Oh, it's going pretty well. It's beautiful up here. Getting a lot of things done on my couple of days off here. Yard's looking good. House is looking good. Feels good to be outside.
Yes, the weather has been great. We've definitely been sitting outside a good bit past couple of days. Well, not just sitting outside, like you said, working on the yard and stuff like that too. It's been pretty good,
Yes, I'm just overjoyed to be rid of the cold weather.
right?
I'm over it.
Yep, and it's good to finally kind of get back on somewhat of a schedule so we can record together. Listeners, we hope you enjoyed our little flashback to 1992.
Oh, that was a cool episode. I forgot about that one.
Yep, we released that about 2 weeks ago. Hopefully, by the time you're hearing this episode, if you haven't listened to it, go back and give it a listen. It's We decided to do it to give a little bit of a taste of our other channel, the Wiki Wacky Radio Show, and also because our schedules weren't gonna line up to record current news, so we decided to do something a little fun to still put out an episode. And with that, we'll jump right into our news for today, and I believe, Frank, you're kicking it off.
Sure. So I thought we'd start with the Roe v. Wade stuff, okay?
Right.
Because, there was this leak from the Supreme Court of the draft decision by Justice Samuel Alito that supposedly, the conservatives on the court, the five, are going to overturn Roe v. Wade probably, did they say June? I'm thinking early June or something.
Yeah, June, July, something like that.
Yeah. So this got leaked, and everybody's been up in arms about it, which I think is kind of interesting. Because if you remember, we've said right here on this channel before, back when we did our 2022 New Year's predictions, we predicted that this would be overturned this year, okay? Or at least one of us did. And I feel like the way I have it here in my notes is that the writing has been on the wall for some time about the court's decision regarding Roe, because we've had our eyes. You can go back and look at some of our material, even, going back into 2021, before we made our 2022 New Year's predictions, we've been following some cases that, keep escalating up regarding abortion and seem like they're making their way towards the Supreme Court, to the Supreme Court. There have been several cases that are supposed to challenge Roe from several states. Some of them we've seen hit the court already, and they've gotten slapped back down. But this one out of Mississippi, I guess, is pretty, it goes pretty far in how it questions Roe and how it brings Roe's relevancy up. So, I feel like this has been coming down the pike. And actually, if you listen to people like Elizabeth Warren, she's been out stomping around at these rallies and demonstrations, protests they've been having. And if you listen to her, I don't have the exact quote, but I listened to her myself, and she talks about it as if it will be. If you listen to her, she talks about it as if it will be a state-by-state issue. So, that almost led me to wonder, so then why push for these marches and why attend them and everything? If it's just going to be a state issue and it's a done deal and it's basically already been decided, why spend all this time out there whipping up these crowds and everything?
Right. Well, they don't believe in federalism. That's part of it.
Well, that may be part of it, but I think what's more obvious is that, she wants to ride this wave and keep the momentum going into November.
Yep.
See, that's what's really happening is election season's coming up.
Yep.
It's right around the corner. And so therefore, I think that's why there's been so much of a debate on this leaker and who's the leaker and why did they leak and everything. Because the people who are really in the know, like us on this channel, who have been calling the balls and strikes as we've seen them for years now, We have a whole body of content you can go back and interact with if you think we're just full of it or anything. We've been watching this, and somebody like Elizabeth Warren knows too. So the fact that it's overturning doesn't really have anything to do with the price of tea in China.
Right.
But, the point I wanted to make on that is even Ruth Bader Ginsburg herself, if you can go back and find video footage of her saying herself that Roe was wrongly decided.
Yep.
And back before Roe, it was a state-by-state issue. And that's one of her big complaints about it, is that Roe wasn't, as she would say it, Roe wasn't the right case. But, that sort of is just like splitting hairs. But but even Ruth Bader Ginsburg said that Roe was wrongly decided. So the idea of the court taking another look at this or overturning Roe is not crazy.
Right.
So, it's not crazy to somebody like Liz Warren. It just, election season's coming up. So, the parties almost seem to be using this and other issues, as you'll see in a minute. But they seem to be using this abortion thing as a way to sort of rally the troops and sort of get their respective voting bases, to organize themselves and be prepared going into November. So it's kind of interesting to me. I'll get your thoughts on all of that before I move forward. But when you look at it through that lens of, November is just around the corner, I think a lot of stuff actually starts to make a little more sense instead of it just being like, well, why is this happening now? Why would this be?
Right. Yeah. Especially regarding the link, I definitely see that very much. Because otherwise there wouldn't have really been any point to link it anyway. The decision was likely going to be the decision either way. So if somebody wanted to get it out there to stoke up the people, to get them out in the streets, so then, because it's May now, November is only 6 months away. So they got to get out early, hopefully, because they got to have plenty of time to hopefully change people's minds.
Yeah.
And regarding the, decision overall, of course, we both think that's a good thing. It'd be really great if one day abortions are banned in all the states, but given the way our government is set up, this is pretty much the best we can ask for now, is it being sent back to the states, and each state can decide what restrictions they want. If California wants to allow abortions up till birth practically, or in Virginia after birth, they'll be able to, as much as people like us hate it. And then the same with Texas, Mississippi, Alabama. If they want to set restrictions to heartbeat bills or no abortions, period, they'll be able to.
Well, I think that's a very fair point. Our system is set up a certain way where it's supposed to be what they would say bottom up,
right?
Not top down. We're not supposed to have some big government that dictates things to the states, and then the states dictate it to the municipalities. It goes the other way.
Right.
Government closest to home is supposed to be the most important government, because that's actually where you live, where you reside. And in that regards, I think it is super important that this is being turned back to the states, not just because of constitutionality and the 10th Amendment and reserved states' rights and, the Constitution, but also because I think it makes a lot more things clear when you're looking at it from the state and local level.
Sure.
Because it's like I just said, that's where you actually live, that's where you reside, that's where you're having the problems. And it's also your number one source of funding. You know,
Yep.
people can work out who funds these things, how they're funded, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the biggest problems we've seen on the federal level, you know, with Roe, since Roe was decided the way it was, is they tried to make an amendment, a famous amendment, the Hyde Amendment,
Yep.
right? That says that no federal monies is ever going to pay for or fund abortions, you
Right.
know, with taxpayer dollars. Because it's sort of the idea, why would you take money from somebody like in Mississippi who absolutely doesn't believe, Mississippi as a state in general, you know, we're speaking generally, but they don't believe in this types of stuff.
Right.
So why would a dollar out of somebody's pocketbook in Mississippi ever have to go towards paying for somebody else's abortion in, let's say, California or New York or Virginia?
Right.
So that was supposed to be stopped. But over the years, they've just totally neglected that Hyde Amendment. And
Yep.
they've basically, I mean, I don't want to say that it is, since we're on the straight news side here on this channel, Conservative Conversations. But something sticks out in my mind as maybe it's even been repealed by now.
I definitely feel like recently they at least tried to not include the Hyde Amendment in some budgets that they passed. I don't recall if it was or was not officially, but I believe they definitely tried to not include it.
Yeah, I mean, because not even to get into the moral aspects of abortion and everything, but just to keep it on a truly cleanly conservative side of things, is if you want to have your abortion or whatever, I can go a little libertarian, but I still want to be conservative. It shouldn't come out of my pocketbook. Right. You know, if you want to have an abortion, it should come out of your pocketbook or whatever. Get a neighbor, somebody who lives near you, somebody in your state to help you. Don't bill me for your problems, you know.
Right.
So,
Yep, that would definitely apply in a lot of situations in our country. And to keep it on the Roe v. Wade and abortion topic real quick before we move on, I had originally wanted to see if I could make some kind of comparison between states that have pretty rigorous animal rights laws, comparing them to their abortion laws, and vice versa in states that don't have rigorous animal rights and stuff like that. And there's actually a lot to be compared, because there's various aspects of what people might call animal rights and the protection of animals and laws against abuse of animals and stuff like that. So I kind of gave up on making a comparison, but I did find a couple little bits that stood out to me, because what I wanted to compare was maybe see how like a state like California might treat animals compared to how they would treat the unborn babies and stuff like that. But what I did find was a little article from the Foundation of Economic Education, and it was talking about sort of the philosophy and the politics of animal rights.
Sure.
And it kind of went into stuff that wasn't quite what I was looking for, but it did talk about the concept of rights and duties, how rights and duties go together. And they kind of use an example of how, we have the right to our private property, and for, our private property not to be violated or vandalized and stuff like that. So you have your home, your own private land, and you have your neighbor, and you have the right for your neighbor not to come vandalize your property and trespass all the time without your permission. And with your right of that, your neighbor has the duty not to be trespassing or vandalizing your property.
Sure.
Well, with animal rights, you would have to expect that animals are going to keep up the duty aspect of it if we're giving them rights. So how would an animal do such a thing? if you want to take the private property, how are you going to tell the deer down the street to respect your right and to have the duty of not trespassing on your land? And he said something that I thought was kind of funny, because the person writing this article said it would bring up embarrassing but practical questions.
Yeah.
Like, for who would represent or defend the animal in court, and how the animal would understand the situation. Well, while I was trying to find stuff to make comparisons, I did see that the state of Maine just happens to have answered that by having a courtroom animal advocate program. Can you believe such a thing?
Well, I don't understand the concept. So
I
what
don't
is
either.
it?
I didn't look into what the program is, but I assume the animal basically gets a lawyer of some sort to defend it in like a case where maybe somebody's abusing that animal.
Well, I don't know. I think we might have to look into that, because
Right.
it wouldn't just be like somebody can bring animals into the courtroom, like a whole sort of like therapy dog kind of thing, or
No, I mean, the title of it is the Courtroom Animal Advocate Program. So just based on that, I don't think it sounds like anything related to somebody being able to have a companion animal. It sounds like they're trying to provide some type of representation for the animal in the courtroom. Like you said, we might have to look into it, because I didn't really have time to dig into it farther.
Well, that's fine. I mean, it is sort of interesting to think about.
Right.
And I love the quote, embarrassing but practical implications, because there are a lot of stuff comes to mind. And, I could just tell you a couple things anecdotally, but, I made the joke right before we came onto the air. I said, well, if they make it so that animals can win the lottery, that's it for me. Game over. I'm out, because how's an animal going to manage money?
Yep.
So, and there have been cases, I don't remember the particular case, but you can look this up, you can take it to the bank. There have been people who will sometimes leave what's left in their estate to their pets.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, it's like we live in a free country and you can do what you want. And if you want to leave $1 million to your cat, fine. I can sometimes go towards the libertarian side and say, why the hell not? But what's an animal going to do with money? How are they going to make legal decisions? It's really an exercise in foolishness. But there are those types out there that advocate for this types of stuff. So I don't know. It is sort of an interesting line of thought,
Right. Well, I mean, ultimately, my point is that, it's for people who are pro-life and want to protect the unborn. It's silly how states can have some of these laws protecting animals, but they have not any equal concern for unborn babies and stuff like that. And I certainly don't condone any kind of abuse towards animals and anything like that. I love animals, but I don't think they should be given what we would see as equal rights as humans, because they can't uphold them. They can't really exercise their rights.
I totally understand, because we're on the same side of the fence, and we often see things very similarly, but it's the same type of people who say, well, nobody really hunts today. Nobody really needs to hunt today. Nobody needs to go out and have these guns and go kill these poor animals. But then they say, come line up, get your abortion today,
Right.
on this street corner, on the street corner over. We should have more abortions.
Right.
And the two really don't track. I mean, we should just let the deer take over Michigan and kill all the humans. I don't, the two don't jive.
Nope. I mean, they humanize animals and dehumanize babies.
Yeah.
That's what's happening.
Yeah.
So.
Yep.
And I think that's pretty much all I had as
Well,
far
it leads me pretty well into,
Yeah, okay.
sort of what I was talking about already, but on to the next topic is, sort of my whole point to this whole thing is under the umbrella of, or seeing things through the lens of November's coming. So that's how I want to look at all this. And if you have studied the news, which I know you have, there have also been a big uptick in gun violence and mass shootings now. We're leading into the summer, which is a nice, convenient, easy time for people to organize and march and demonstrate. And so, once again, I mean, just last week, I think there were at least three.
Yeah, like over the weekend.
In 1 week. I mean, there was the one in, Houston? The one in...
I think it was Dallas.
Okay, wherever. The one in Texas. There was one in California and one up in Buffalo, New York. Excuse me.
Right.
So, I mean, it could just be me trying to put my own spin on the news or whatever, but to me it kind of makes sense. I mean, let's see how I have it written out here. What's the second biggest issue that whips Americans up like abortion does? Gun rights. It sure seems like an appropriate time for patriots to reaffirm their love of firearms, the Second Amendment, and the Constitution, while Democrats now have brand new examples to point towards while demanding radical gun reform. So it's like I was saying on the abortion point. It's like almost like both parties now have this great opportunity to whip their bases up going into November and get them in lockstep and ready to vote,
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely see how, these events can be used as opportunities to whip up the base. Definitely, because...
Well, yes, and I don't know if you were maybe going this way, but as a cautionary statement, I mean, I doubt anybody seriously would want all of this to happen.
Right.
Like, go shoot up a Walmart. I doubt anybody's really advocating and saying, go.
Right.
But it sure is convenient.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely rhetoric out there that, or people are saying, these people are out, they're coming to get you.
Yeah.
You need to get out there and fight back because these other politicians are going to ruin your life.
That's right.
There's definitely talk like that out there.
They're going to put y'all back in chains.
That's right. Exactly. So I definitely see that. And, I saw a quote from the New York City mayor just recently, which you would think he'd have a little bit better, I don't think self-awareness is what I'm looking for here, but better, maybe just awareness in general. I don't know.
Sure.
But I'll do my best to repeat his quote here. And it's comes after, or maybe not after. He's sort of referring to, well, not referring to, but it's related to a Second Amendment case that's in front of the Supreme Court that's supposed to be decided by the end of this term, I believe, and has pretty wide-reaching implications, especially in New York, which is, I believe, where the case originated from. But, all right. The main part of his quote I have is like a second half of something he said. And he says something, but we should all be concerned that allowing residents to carry handguns in public is the exact wrong way to combat rising crime. Well, I'll tell you what, if all 10 or 11 of those black people in that store had a handgun, they might not be dead today, Mayor.
Well, you know that in general, I absolutely agree with you. But,
Yep.
I mean, I don't know. I don't know why you peppered this in or why it works so well. But I mean, these politicians are just like opportunistic parasites,
Yep.
aren't they? I
Yep.
mean, the reason I hesitated for a moment before I even reacted is because it seems so disrespectful, and I know you don't mean it,
Yeah.
but to use these recent victims like this, just as talking points, even on our side, whatever. I mean, it's a good, fair point that you have. Very good,
Yeah.
very fair. But it just seems so sick, and everybody just jumps on the bandwagon no matter what. It's
Well, and the idea that he would think that just because more lawful gun ownership in his city is permitted, that's going to cause more crime. And as we've covered before, there are 500,000 to 2 million cases each year of defensive firearm use, as opposed to even less numbers of crimes being committed with firearms. So it would certainly reason to stand that the citizens of New York City would better be able to protect themselves against violent crime if they could own a firearm. And sort of as you were saying, for him to go on right after all this happened and suggest that, it's only the guns that are causing the problem, and, getting rid of them will make crime go away. Well, New York City already has tough crime laws, just like Chicago, just like other large cities.
Well, of course. Well, and that's why I agree with you, and your point is right and valid, because I really just believe it. There was a time in this country, it's actually one of the times that made us pretty famous, back in the Old West, where everybody had a 6-shooter on their hip, and things were decided pretty quickly,
Right.
You want to talk constitutionally about right to a quick and speedy trial? They had them back then. I'll tell you that. They had quick and speedy trials.
Right.
And everybody had a gun on their hip, and the country worked. Okay? It might not have been the cleanest, most beautiful, But still, sometimes you go to certain parts of Asia, and they'll say, hey, cowboy, when they know you're an American. Because it's not just a genre of literature, a genre of film. It wasn't just a time period. It was a whole culture.
Yeah, cowboys don't exist anywhere else.
Yes, and that is because of our Second Amendment, because we do have the right to defense, to self-defense. And your point is valid. I've said it all along. I know I'm not the first person who's ever said it, but the only thing that stops a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. So you're absolutely right. My favorite example is if somebody walks into a crowded bar, let's say in North Texas, and they say, give me all your money, to the guy at the cash register. Well, the guy at the cash register might hand him all his money, but when he turns around, he's probably going to have however many people are in the bar, let's say 20 guns pointing in his face. He's not going to leave with that money,
Right.
Yep. So, I mean, it just is true. You can do it in principle, in theory. You can prove that this is accurate, okay? And it all comes down to choice. And the thing that must be acknowledged, no matter what side of the fence you're on, is really nothing. Putting a gun in everybody's hands or taking a gun from everybody's hands is still not going to stop a psycho hell-bent on killing people.
Right.
Let's say guns never existed. Would you still have mass murdering incidents? Yes.
Yeah.
I promise you.
Yeah.
Hitler
Exactly.
used cyanide. Okay,
Right.
That'll be the only, just anecdotal, but come on.
Right.
People can still kill people with or without a gun.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, and like sort of how you were saying, like with it's November just around the corner. I kind of think what the mayor was saying kind of leans into that too. Not just jumping on gun control and stuff like that, but he's part of the headline that originally caught my attention was the mayor had said something about beware, and the quote that said something about beware isn't really what stood out to me other than the headline part. So I think he is kind of like, as you're saying, trying to rally up the people for November because if the court overturns
Yes.
this decision,
You're leading right into my next point. Go ahead.
Yep, if the court overturns this decision, it's going to be bad for the Democrats are saying it's going to be bad for you guys, their voter base. There's going to be more gun violence,
Restrictions.
Yep.
On your body and
Yep.
blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Doom and gloom and
Right.
fear. It's the fear.
Right, because they've already said, this overturning of Roe v. Wade can mean that they're going to outlaw interracial marriages.
Yeah, and same-sex marriages.
Yeah,
and
that
all
slippery
that.
slope they always tell conservatives not to talk about.
Yeah. Well, that's great that you bring that up, okay? And I want to give credit where credit's due. I've been listening. I just bought a new car. I've got Sirius XM radio. Okay, this isn't a plug for them, but I do quite enjoy it. And I've been listening to a lot of the Patriot channel on channel 125, and there's a girl who comes on the weekends. Her name's Sunny. I don't know her last name, but she's an African-American chick, and she's really not one of my favorite personalities that come on there. I don't just love listening to her, and I don't just recommend her or anything, but, I'm open-minded, and I listened to her for quite a while, and she made some good points. She brought this to my attention. This wasn't just something that just fell out of the sky into my brain. I overheard her talking about it, and I think it's important. So, if the decision on Roe does come out as leaked, right? It's going to be a 5-4 decision to overturn Roe. Bye-bye, Roe. Well, there's probably going to be another summer of love, if you remember that quote.
Yep.
Like back in 2019 when all those Black Lives Matter protests and riots spread across America like a plague following the death of George Floyd. You remember that?
Yep, 2020.
2020, whatever. I mean, it was back before the pandemic. Was it?
That was like right after it got started, pretty much.
Oh, okay, that's right.
Yep.
So 2020. Okay. So, but anyway, the point stands. I'm
Yeah.
off by a year, but okay. So, I think that's super interesting that she would say that there's going to be these protests. She's the one who brought it up. And I thought, well, this makes sense because not only would it serve as a democratic grassroots sort of call to action, because they're going to take your rights away or whatever. Yep. We got to get out there and vote Democrat. Vote blue no matter who. But it also seems obvious to me, and here's an interesting aspect that sort of you'll only get right here on Conservative Conversations. It seems pretty obvious to me that all the property damage and loss of goods due to theft and vandalism will further fuel inflation spikes and supply chain issues, which conveniently will also have the clever ability to offer old Joe Biden an excuse for future shortages, or like if things get worse, if the state of affairs get worse, in regards to food, fuel, and other goods, like in the case of this baby formula shortage that we've been hearing a lot about recently. Right. So maybe now it's baby formula, baby food, whatever kinds of things. But imagine it all just that powder keg lights and they start burning these businesses down and looting the targets and everything on the shelves is gone off the shelves. No accounting for it, because maybe it was taken by government agents as part of I don't want to get too conspiratorial or anything. Maybe it got really taken by rioters and looters. Maybe they really burned the Target down with all the stuff in it. But you see, things will probably get worse. And Biden will have a clever excuse, and he'll say, well, if the Supreme Court hadn't done this and hadn't, if people hadn't felt the need to get out and make their voices heard, they'll spin it all.
Right,
but it'll be a clever excuse for him, don't you think?
That would be just like a Democrat. It's never the, reaction people are having. It's what they're reacting to. That's the problem.
Yeah.
It's never the rioting in the streets. It's whatever caused it, whether it be the George Floyd thing or Roe v. Wade being overturned. It's not that. It's not the rioters. It's whatever caused them to get out there. That's always the problem.
Well, and that's why I think is interesting. It'll be in the show notes, but Tucker Carlson did a really great segment, and he was talking about how they've known about the baby formula problem, and just like I'm sitting here predicting, like we have with Roe, that it would be overturned. I mean, the writing is on the wall for some of this stuff. You can see into the future. That's why we started this podcast, was so that we would just stop spitting into the wind and feeling like, we're crazy.
Right.
Because we've said this. We used to have private conversations, and we would predict these things. These things are predictable. But the people who have the power up there in Washington, they act like, oh, no, everything's just always reactionary. So even though there were calls about baby formula shortage as far back as October, it's really just sinking in now, and nobody's done anything about it until we have no supply.
Yeah.
So here again, I mean, this is why I'm saying I swear they'll use it as a convenient excuse because they haven't taken any preemptive measure in regards to these shortages, extremely high fuel costs, inflationary pricing on, just average costs of goods.
Right. Well, I actually have a statistics on the inflation. I believe, I'm not going to get the exact number right unless I come across it here in a second, but the average American is spending between $300 to $400 more a month this year than they were just last year. And it's only supposed to be getting worse. There's already been some predictions about a recession coming by the end of the year. And, inflation certainly isn't just going to start reversing itself within that time. It'd probably get worse. So, my advice to you folks, stock up on all your non-perishable goods now while you can still get them at a reasonable price. For 6 months from now, they're even another 10-20% higher.
Yeah, very good advice, I would think.
And, sticking with inflation, I guess, I did have a few other notes. I wasn't sure if you'd continue with what you were saying or not.
No, I'm pretty much done. I only have one last point on sort of on the squish Republicans, if you remember that point.
Oh, yeah, well, okay, well then let me see what I got here. I had a little bit of a headline that said that inflation is the top issue heading into the midterms for people, per Pew Research, on a survey they took from April 25th to I think May 1st it was. I did try to see if they asked about the abortion issue, but I don't think they did, so it's possible that could have overtaken inflation. But according to the survey, some 70% of people say that inflation is a very big problem for the country. And then followed by 55% for healthcare affordability, and then also for violent crime. 84% of Republicans say that inflation is the top issue, and only about 54% of Democrats say it is. No, 57. And then, as I mentioned, the U.S. households are spending $341 a month more. That's what the number was.
Say it again. What's the figure?
$341 a month more this year than compared to last year.
Per month.
And
right?
Say it one
per
time.
month?
Yep, per month. Which, that's a good bit.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
I mean, that's over $4,000 a year, $4,500.
Yeah. And one other thing in this article about it that kind of stood out to me was, our modern day Dr. Evil, Jeff Bezos. You know who people say he looks like?
He kind of does, yeah.
Yeah. He had tweeted at Joe Biden after Joe Biden's people tweeted something like, let me see, where's the quote? Oh, you want to bring down inflation? Let's make sure the wealthiest corporations pay their fair share.
Of course.
Exactly. And then quoting his Biden's tweet, Bezos responded by saying, raising corporation taxes is fine to discuss. Taming inflation is critical to discuss. Mushing them together is just misdirection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, isn't that true?
Right? Because, even if you raise corporate taxes, that's not going to make inflation go away.
Well, you also, I don't mean to step on your toes as you're speaking or whatever, but it just pops into my mind. These are the same people who said inflation was transitory, no big deal, it's not going to linger, it won't stick around. I mean, how can you take these people seriously?
Right? So, with admitting it without admitting it, they're saying you got to fix inflation, which we thought was transitory, by taxing the bejesus out of corporations and wealthy people.
Hell yeah, that'll do it.
Yep. And then just to kind of finish this little bit up,
I mean, because that wouldn't have any negative ramifications, would it?
Nope.
No, cost of goods will surely they'll go down when you raise the taxes on the corporations that produce the goods. Surely they'll go down.
Right. Well, Bezos also had said the $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan contributed to the spike in inflation.
Well, of course it did.
Right. And then lastly, the Transportation Secretary, Madam Pete Buttigieg.
Madam?
I'm making fun of him.
Yeah, I know.
He was on, I believe, CNBC's Squawk Box show.
Oh, yeah.
And he was, let's see, where did the quote go here? Oh, he was asked about Jeff Bezos, what he said, tweeting at Joe Biden. And this is his fantastic answer. The president's theory of the case when it comes to economics is probably never going to be wildly popular with billionaires for the simple reason that he is calling on them to pay their fair share. Again, repeating what the president said and totally avoiding him being even asked. Let's see if I do have the question when he was asked. Oh, he was just asked about the administration's inflation policy. But he doesn't address it. He just says that, the billionaires aren't going to be happy with the Biden's policy on inflation, because he doesn't really have one, because he wants to tax the bejesus out of them, make them pay their fair share. So they can only repeat the talking points, and they don't even address the actual issue that 70% of Americans are even concerned about.
Yeah.
And then, well, I guess not and then. I suppose that's basically all I have. And to tie it into what you sort of brought up a little bit ago with the squishy Republicans, is that we know the Democrats always vote for these big spending packages that, add to the inflation problem. But we have, well, I don't really want to take your point because you said it to me off air. What do the Republicans do about inflation?
Well, I don't mind who says it, so long as the point's made. But regarding inflation and squish Republicans, I definitely wanted to make a comment about two topics being linked, those two topics being linked. So Republicans sure can complain about inflation as it relates to Biden's agenda and spending, They'll get out there and say, he shouldn't have shut down the pipeline, and he shouldn't have done this, and his policy sucks in this regard, and Janet Yellen is full of baloney in this regard. But then when it comes down to it, I mean, they've said several times themselves that this war in Ukraine is the biggest concern in the world right now, let alone here at home. It's the biggest concern. And despite inflation and national debt and government spending, they all voted, except for Rand Paul, to send another $40 billion in aid to the Ukraine. Now, that's $40 billion. You're talking about how much the average cost per family's gone up this year alone.
Right.
And here they are sending off these giant aid packages to countries. I mean, I guarantee you take an average sampling of 100 Ohioans, because we're right here in Ohio. They've never been to Ukraine. I doubt they could find Ukraine on a map. Right. I'd bet a big chunk of my life's blood that they couldn't find Ukraine on a map if you just took a sampling of 100 people. No way.
Yeah.
But they're getting our money.
Yep.
Big payments of our money.
Right. Mothers can't feed their babies because we're running out of formula, but we're shipping $40 billion over there instead of.
That's right. I mean, it's crazy.
Well, the problem.
The way I put it here in my notes, not just to dwell on the shortages that we're already facing, but our president, whether he's my president or not, we'll put that aside. But the American president has come out and said that there will be food shortages here in our country. There will be. It's coming.
Yeah.
There will be food shortages.
Right.
But Ukraine takes priority, even with the Republicans.
Yep.
So, Tucker Carlson, it'll be in the show notes. It's all in the same Tucker Carlson clip or whatever. It's maybe like a half-hour thing. But he did a great segment on this. He talks about some other issues too, but he did a great comparison to waking up Christmas morning, all ready for your presents you've waited for all year, and finding out that your parents didn't give you anything because they gave everything away to the kid down the street. Some kid who doesn't live even in your block, in your neighborhood. They gave some kid in Maine a train or a bicycle, whatever. So, I just think it's crazy, but tough times may be coming here to this country, to us, to a movie theater near you, as they used to say. But our elected officials seem to be in a race to empty America's savings account rather than build it up and make sure we can weather this storm.
Yep. That's why you don't rely on the government.
That's right. Plant a victory garden, folks.
Yep. And the thing about squishy Republicans that had originally stood out to me when I was trying to get some ideas for the show was that I didn't catch the lady's name. I only saw the headline. But it was about some GOP senator woman. I don't know if she's on state level or just a senator I've not heard of, apologizing for her comments, saying that there's only two sexes. And what I was going to kind of briefly just talk about with the squishy Republicans is, we should not be voting for any Republicans like that anymore. I think we're past the point of trying to appease people that we might think are moderate on issues like that. Yeah. Because we've spent a lot of time talking about the transgender and biological sex issue. I don't think we have to go on and on about it right now. And another one who I think has a good chance of winning, who I think will be as squished as this Dr. Oz running in Pennsylvania. There's been a lot of reports about him and even videos of him in the past being pro-gun control and being pro-transgender, supporting, that whole deal. And hopefully, good actual conservatives aren't going to be voting for those people too much. Unfortunately, I think Dr. Oz has a pretty good chance of winning. Hopefully, we'll find out tomorrow, because today, as we're recording, is the Pennsylvania primary.
I hope that black chick that's running against him upsets the whole thing and wins.
Yeah, that would be pretty nice.
What's her name?
Kathy Barnett.
That's right, yep. Yes. I hope she takes the whole thing in a landslide.
Yep. And, but folks, if you got any conservatives like that running in your districts, in your states, unless there are no better options, don't vote for them, I'd say.
Well, and I'd like to point out, we're fair-minded people on this channel, and there are good Democrats.
Yeah.
If you look at what Joe Manchin just stood up for, he represented his state. Now, you may be a Democrat listening to this, and you may hate my guts, you may hate Joe Manchin's guts because of what he just did. Mm-hmm. But you have to understand, we both originate from West Virginia. That's our state.
Yep.
That's our home state. And he stood up for what West Virginians really believe.
Yep.
He didn't just cave to party politics. Right. So, good people are out there. Right. Sometimes you do have to vote outside your comfort zone, let's say. But it's like we talked about earlier, local matters more, really, and you should get to know your local people and then build up.
Yeah.
Build up from there.
Exactly. I think that's pretty much all I have. I don't have any more notes left written down.
Well, the only other thing I could say while we're just here on this recording and keeping it fresh is I think the policy of appeasement in any regard is not good.
No. Nope.
If you and somebody else are coming from two opposite ends of the spectrum, I think it's totally disingenuous to start by saying, well, let me give you this.
Right.
Let me give you this. Let me give you something. Let me give you $1, some slight advance. I'll give you a 10-second head start, whatever. That's so ethically and morally wrong right off the get-go. Because if there's an issue and two people care about it, and they come at it from two different angles, two different sets of eyes, you tackle the issue.
Right.
And that's what you should be looking for. That's how I would put it personally, is you should find people that really care about the issues that you care about.
Right.
Somebody who wants to tackle an issue, not an opponent, not a party, not a movement.
Exactly.
Somebody who wants to roll up their sleeves and get their hands dirty, fixing the neighborhood, or fixing the state, or fixing the country.
Right.
Not somebody who just wants to play tag in this big game of innie or outie.
Right. Yep, I would agree. Definitely. Thought I was going to have a little bit of a comment to add on there, but slipped my mind as I was listening to you.
Well, with that, that's everything I got to say. Just as a friendly, before we get off here, but we were really going to dive into this Roe versus Wade thing, and it just is such a big topic that we've delayed and delayed and delayed going into it. Because sometimes I even get sort of emotional on the topic, so it's something. I've had the footage that we're going to include in the show notes of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, her thoughts on it. Because I did a deep dive on Roe versus Wade. I went back and tracked the history, how it made itself up to the Supreme Court, the two different sides, the parties involved.
Right.
And a lot of time's passed. I think it's been like 40 years or something. So even the original litigants in Roe have changed. Some of them have changed their mindsets. You know, a lot's happened.
I just read a little article the other day that was sort of talking about, I wish I remembered the lady's name, the woman's name who was Roe.
Yeah.
She ended up turning into a pro-life person
Yep.
in her later years.
Well, I'm sure. And plus, you know, the time was a little different.
Sure.
They maybe had ultrasounds, but they weren't widely available. And that's changed a lot, too, because when you can actually see what's happening,
Exactly.
I mean, it's a very ugly procedure, and not just theoretically.
Right. Yep.
It is very ugly procedure.
Yep.
So, you know. Yep. But anyway, folks, so I hope maybe we didn't really get too deep into that particular subject matter, but I think there's some good beefy material here you might be able to use. You know, should the conversation of Roe come up with a family member or a friend or somebody you maybe respect but don't agree with.
Sure.
So, you know, just I would really advise you, it's on my heart to say, don't be afraid of having these conversations.
Right.
You know, I think it's pertinent that it's coming up.
Yep.
And don't just let it be co-opted by the other side.
Right. Yep. It's an important issue to us. We both have babies coming into our lives. Not our own babies. Neither of us are having kids. But we got family members and really good friends in our lives that are all going to be having babies within this year or probably earliest start of next year. So
yep. It seems to be baby season.
That's right. So it's an important issue, and we definitely keep a track of it. And we hope you are too, folks.
That's right. We hope you'll keep following us for more updates and other pertinent content.
Yep. And you can check out our website, contemporaryconservative.net. You can check out our other show, as I mentioned at the top, the Wiki Wacky Radio Show. Follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You can also find our episodes on YouTube. And be sure to reach out to us directly with any comments, feedback, or suggestions, or your own opinions. And you can find our email addresses in the show notes, as well as I'll tell you mine now. It's contempconserve2@gmail.com. That's C-O, if I can spell, CONTEMPCONSERV2@gmail.com.
Yes, and I'm similarly contempconserve@gmail. So there's no number 2. But
we'd love to hear from you.
We certainly would. And as always, thanks for listening.